We are now live. So everyone, welcome to today's Work Integrated Learning, Work-Based Learning info session. My name is Eddie Chustovic and I am an academic in the Department of Engineering, and I'm actually the coordinator, the program director, as you might say. On the line, we also have Noor Rahim, who'll shortly say a few words about himself, and we have Steve and Mary. These two gentlemen here are basically WIL advisors. They are the people specifically behind the scenes doing all the actual hard work to make sure that you guys have no hiccups along the way. And together, the three of us, plus some other individuals, make up the Work Integrated Learning team that supports the placements, sourcing the companies, making sure that you guys are ready for the placements, etc., etc., etc. So what we're going to do today, a quick introduction. Today is all about giving you guys the basic information of what Work Integrated Learning is, how it works, who's eligible, who are the companies, what is WIL and what it's not, because it's very important that you understand what it's not, because a lot of people don't have that basic knowledge of what's available and what's possible as part of your placement. We'll also talk briefly about the impact of COVID-19 on Work Integrated Learning placements. We'll talk about what it's doing now and what it's going to do potentially in the near future. Rest assured that we are 100% prepared for any possible scenario. We've demonstrated that in this particular semester with all the students that we have on placement, and I'm sure that we'll be able to deal with anything that comes in the second semester and beyond. We have essentially a couple of different groups on the call today. One of the groups that we're targeting with today's info session is, of course, the master's student cohort, who are due to commence these WIL placements in second semester. The second cohort of students that we have online, I could see some of them, which is fantastic that you've turned up, are second and third year students. So third year students, if you're currently a third year student in your first semester, you will be commencing your Work Integrated Learning placements, hopefully, if you get through, which I assume you will, right at the end of this year. So let's say the third week of November all the way through to July. The master students, you should be commencing sometime around July till the end of the year. Now, this is all under a big question mark, depending on how COVID-19 impacts things, and we'll talk about that in more detail. And then we have other groups of students. We have groups of students who are second years, and we have groups of students who have just arrived. They're fresh master students. Please use this info session as a good way to just get your head around what is expected of you so that you can better prepare in the coming semesters to get into the program itself. So hopefully that clarifies who we're targeting. Our number one target group for today will be the master students who are in their penultimate, that means your second last semester of your master's program. And that means any master's program at Trobe University's engineering programs, right? It doesn't matter which one you're in, we will deal with each one separately. Okay, so that's it from me, guys. Short little introduction about what today is. I'm going to hand it over to my colleagues, Steve Mary and Noor Rahim, for a quick introduction to who they are and what they do, and we will begin the presentation.
All right, so my name is Noor Rahim. I have my colleague here, Steve Mary. We are basically the Work Integrated Learning team who help with program administration, operations, and logistics. So that's a picture of Steve, myself, Tim Austin, who is not on this call today. He is the Work Integrated Learning Administrator, and we support the program director, Eddie Chustovic, to basically get all of you students a placement and to really take care of everything in the background. So Work Integrated Learning, it's a broad term. A lot of people get confused about it. There's a lot of other words that you guys might have heard of, things like internships, placements. I mean, what WIL is just an umbrella term. So we're allowing students to obviously go out there, undertake some sort of real work situation for a period of time and gain experience within that organization. The major or one of the areas of focus for Work Integrated Learning is your learning. So it's that student learning. So yes, you are there to help a company's strategic goals or to help with that. But obviously, when you are helping with that, you're trying to learn through that experience. So it is directly correlated to your experience to learn. So it's very similar to another final year subject you can do in your last semester, where you can do a project or you can do an industry project. This WIL experience is you doing a similar thing, but in industry as a member of that team. So you will be physically there. That's obviously how we would run our program in the past, but because of COVID-19, I'll explain that a little bit further down the track. So EMS5WLA, EMS5WLB, what are they? What's the weighting on each subject? And I guess why have we split it into two? I won't go into too much detail. I'll just give you a quick broad view of it. Eddie will get into the detail of why we split them up. But basically, EMS5WLA is a 30 credit point subject. EMS5WLB is another 30 credit point subject. They both add to 60 credit points. It is, as Eddie said, in your last semester of your master's engineering student, it goes for a full 6-month period, 20 weeks, 800 hours. And I will get into the start date or the rolling start dates a little bit further into the presentation. But basically, students who successfully secure a WIL placement are eligible for this scholarship. This scholarship is a sum of $10,000. The biggest question I get is, can we negotiate that scholarship? The answer is no, and that's no with a capital no with an exclamation mark. So there is no negotiating that scholarship stipend.
No, while we're on this slide here, I might just quickly explain the change from a single subject to 2 subjects so that we don't have to come back to it, because I think it's topical. Okay, guys, so what's happened is this program has now been running for numerous years, and the program ran under the subject code of EMS4WIL for undergraduates and EMS5WIL for postgraduates. Now, what you'll see happen this year, there's a change. The change is being implemented that so for example, EMS5WIL is changing into these 2 units that Noor has rightfully pointed out here. And EMS4WIL will also change into EMS4WLA and WLB. And the primary reason for this change was not driven by myself or by Noor or by Steve. It was driven by a central committee at the university, which stated that we can't have a single subject which carries 60 credit points. i.e., it's too risky. If a student fails WIL, they lose an entire semester, they fail 60 credit points. And that was just something the university was not comfortable with. So the primary reason for the change is because of that. So what we did is we split, from an academic point of view, we have split WIL into 2 30 credit point units. You enroll into both of them at the same time, essentially, right? So you go through the first section of it, which is your first 3 months, and provided that you're satisfactory completing what you're supposed to be completing, you very simply enroll into the second one and you go through. So from an administrative point of view, a few things have changed, but from your perspective, and most importantly, from the company's perspective, nothing has changed. It's still a 6-month, 800-hour placement into a company. So just keep that in mind. We'll talk about the details of the assessments, but you need to understand why the change was brought about so that you're not asking, why are you increasing the workload? Why are you changing this and so on? So thank you, Noor. And for the undergraduate students, quickly, guys. So it's the same subject code. The only difference is that 5 is a 4 for you guys, and it will be your instance runs in semester 1, 2021. Okay, so just that little clarity there. All right, so eligibility, as Eddie pointed out, second year master's student from relevant course. I will explain that a little bit more in detail now, and you must meet the requirements as outlined in WLA and WLB. I will also allow Eddie to explain that a little bit further when he does get onto the LMS page. But what I mean by second year's master's student from relevant course with WIL is that we might have some students on this chat from the SMELE, S-M-E-L-E, yes, it's a funny name,
or the Master of Telco and Network Engineering courses. Now, those two courses are two courses that are being phased out from the engineering department. And if you are on this chat and you're one of those students from those two courses, you will need to speak to your course coordinator before expressing your interest in work integrated learning. The only reason you need to do this is you need to speak to them to see if work integrated learning can be put onto your study plan. So please remember that. Please check with your course coordinator to see if you can put WIL into your study plan. That is very, very important, because you don't want to get into the expression of interest. You don't want to get halfway. And then when I do a check with the course coordinator or on our student information system, you're not eligible. It will undo a lot of things for yourself and for us as a team. So please bear that in mind. These are just important considerations. I'm going to go through them. Some I've just already pointed out, but the offer of a work integrated placement is not guaranteed. There's a very competitive application process. Obviously, you need to have appropriate prerequisites. If you turn down an opportunity, you may not get another. Projects can be pulled by industry partners at the last minute. This is outside of our control, and I can't stress that enough. We've had some students who've gotten to the final stage and selected by the organization, and for whatever reason, the organization has pulled the project last minute, and unfortunately, the placement has ceased. Now, if that does happen, we will do everything we can to get you a second opportunity. So it's not like we sit there and we go, all right, bad luck. We actually will work with you to give you the best possible opportunity later. But once again, there are no guarantees. You guys have to remember that these are 6 month placements. There is a lot of work that goes into getting you guys these placement opportunities. So it doesn't happen overnight. So it can take some time to even get you that second opportunity. But I think we've already touched on the 30 credit points subject weights for WLA and WLB. And I've already stated down the bottom that we unfortunately can't incorporate WIL into everybody's study plan, especially the SMELI students and the SMT-NE students. So please speak to your course coordinator. All right, visas. This is a big question, especially for international students. If you're an undergraduate student and you're not an international student, this doesn't really affect you. But basically, because our courses are CRICOS registered and WIL is a optional core subject, this does not affect your 40-hour per fortnight limit in regards to your personal work that you have to do. So once again, it does not affect it. So you guys can continue your part-time jobs and work, obviously, not work, but be in your work integrated learning placement for that 6 month duration. All right, expression of interests. Expression of interests, how they are and how they're set up. Eddie will later give you guys the link or show you where it is and how the link is, but just quickly, the link's right here on this page. So I don't want any emails saying, any emails to me, Eddie or Steven saying, where is the link? That link is on this PowerPoint. We will upload this PowerPoint onto LMS. But basically, this link directs you onto an LMS page called Engineering Hub. In the Engineering Hub, there is a subject called EMS5WLA. You guys click onto that, and you guys will see this expression of interest. The expression of interest will open up today, and it will close 2 weeks from today. Okay, so bear that in mind. This will all open today. It might not open straight after this Zoom session, but it will. You guys can check around about 6 o'clock tonight, and you will see all this content on LMS with that opening of the expression of interest. Now,
hello. I'll just jump in.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. I'll just pass it on to Steve, who will explain the two types of placements.
Thanks, Nor. So, yeah, my name is Steve Merry, and I work with Nor Rahim and Eddie Kustovich in the She College. And a big part of my role is to work with industry partners. So obviously Eddie and Nor do that as well, and they do a lot of site visits to industry, but I will work closely with industry partners and help the students to secure some of the placements we've been discussing. And placements in this WIL program will fall into two distinct categories. So you can see here that we've broken them down into what we call university-sourced placements and self-sourced placements. Now, as Noor very clearly stated earlier, not all students can be guaranteed a placement. It is a competitive process. So what we do is we work with industry to source a range of available placements, and that's what we call the university-sourced placements. So industry partners provide us with a position description. And what we then do is we match those to students as a team. We do a lot of work in ranking and looking at students' areas of strength and interest, and we'll do some matching. Students are then shortlisted for university source placements, and they'll be interviewed. So you guys will actually be set up with opportunities to have an interview with an industry partner for your placement. And of course, that's where it becomes a competitive process. So if you are successful in securing a placement, our team then supports the work around setting up those agreements to make sure that the legal side of your placement is organised properly before you begin. The other way a placement can happen is what we call a self-sourced placement. Now, some of the students who are listening today, you guys might be already having some ideas about organisations or companies where you have connections or where you would like to try to secure a placement. And the expression of interest form has a section where students can indicate that they would like to, or they're intending to self-source a placement. So if it's a self-source placement, students advise subject coordinator of the partner that they're planning to undertake a placement with. And what often happens then is Noor Rahim, Eddie Kustovich, myself will look at what you have put forward, and the team will decide if it's a suitable placement opportunity. And if Eddie determines it is, then the subject coordinator, Eddie, will confirm that it can proceed. And that's when we start to look at the paperwork. So we would encourage students to just keep in mind that there are those two ways in which placements can be arranged. So having a bit of a look at self-sourced placements now, we've got some timelines coming up in this slideshow that we'll look at for the subject. Noor has explained to you that at the end of this month, the expression of interest form should be completed. So you guys have about 2 weeks now in which to jump onto the EOI and provide us with the information and your intentions. The cutoff date, therefore, might be somewhat flexible, but end of April is really what we're looking at for that. Industry partners, there will be a list on the LMS, as Noor has mentioned, and it'll tell you who the partners are that we already work with. So if we already work with the partner, we do not want you to try and self-source with that partner. So that's quite an important list for you guys to be aware of, and that will be on the LMS. So please don't approach any industry partners until you're confirmed as being into the subject. So paperwork. Now, legal agreements, placement agreements are an extremely important part of work integrated learning. So what our team does is make sure that the companies that we are working with and that you are working with are very clear on the terms and the length and the scholarship arrangements and the project details. And that's what the paperwork is for. So when you've emailed the WIL team with your proposed self-sourced company, if it's suitable, one of the next steps is that an EOI can be completed by that company so that we can get the full information about the project and the placement you would be doing with them. So payment, as Noor mentioned, there's a $10,000 scholarship that university-sourced placements come with. In the case of self-sourced placements, sometimes companies might choose to pay you directly. In other cases, they may not. And in that case, we will work with them on the scholarship agreement. So that can vary. And the final note there is just saying that we as the WIL team will liaise with the industry partners or with the self-sourced partners to confirm what those details and whether payment is done directly or via scholarship. So the other type of placement obviously is what we were calling the university-sourced placements. Now, our team works really closely with the partners that we have, and there's a lot of work that goes into securing those opportunities and then setting up and arranging interviews. You may have more than one interview, but we can't always guarantee that you'll have extra interviews. So if you, as Noor mentioned earlier, if you do receive an offer, it would be a good idea to accept that offer, because we can't always guarantee an additional interview. To state the obvious, WIL is a very competitive process. So we're working with industry. Industry, especially this year, is facing a whole range of new challenges, and in light of COVID-19, it may not always have the scope that they've had, although we're not sure that it might open up some new opportunities as well. But basically, the message is that industry takes this very seriously, and whilst it's all about your learning, they want to find the right people, because they're always looking ahead to people they might like to employ in the future as well. If you're unsuccessful, so if you do seek a placement but you are not able to secure one, there is also the opportunity of doing ARL, which is the Advanced Research Learning subject. As Noor mentioned before, you can't negotiate the scholarship. So the scholarship is fixed at $10,000. One of the real strengths of work integrated learning at La Trobe is that often, not always, but often, placements can lead to future employment. So one of the reasons companies like to engage with La Trobe on work-based learning is so they can actually find really good people and connect with them early in the hope of possibly providing employment in the future. So that's one of the real strengths of the program. There's a quick note here just mentioning that La Trobe has a whole range of careers services and advice that you can get. So whether you're choosing to university source or self-source a placement, the careers team at La Trobe can really help you in some resume development, interview preparation, getting yourself ready to secure that opportunity. So definitely do all the prep you can, because this could be the first real step in your career and set you off on a great start. So I'm just going to hand briefly over to Noor again, because he's got a bit of information for you on some example position descriptions.
So I'll be very quick on this slide. This is some, I guess, selection criteria or position description points we've extracted from what companies have sent to us, specifically for civil engineering students. The only reason we chose civil engineering here is because we have a lot of civil engineering students who go out on placement. So we definitely have some position descriptions for other organizations, electronics and manufacturing. You guys can email me later if you guys just want an example of that. So quickly, for also what I want to fix, be very careful on is the positional types. You know, the difference between a graduate engineer, student engineer, project engineer. So if you're a master's student, predominantly some of the master's students, looking at resumes I've seen, is that they finish their undergraduate and then they go on to a master's degree. Now, you would still be classified as a graduate civil engineer, because obviously you don't have that industry experience yet, and you're coming to Australia studying a master's course, and now you're basically trying to enter the workforce. Now, if you're a student that actually has a lot more experience in industry, and now you've come to do your master's, so you can obviously gain an advantage when you go into industry, that we can still use that for, let's say, project engineering roles, or roles that require that little bit more of experience. So that's also a good thing. But it's not to say that we can't put you into a graduate civil engineering role. So don't be too fixated on what they mean. All we're trying to get you guys to do is we're trying to get you guys into basically student engineering positions within organizations while you undertake your degree. That's what's important here. So don't be too fixated on the position types. But just a quick example, if you're a civil engineering student, the last one there, deliver professional civil engineering design and document to clients, undertake site inspections as required to ensure that all site conditions are considered in the design process. So I just want you guys to maybe take a second, think about that, see where you have done that in your undergraduate or postgraduate subjects, and see how you guys can sort of relate that maybe to, you know, how would you maybe get a question in your interview scenario, and they would ask you about these specific things. How would you guys respond to that? Most of the interviews do come from this sort of selection criteria in a position description. So I want you guys to have that in the back of your mind. And I'll pass you guys back on to Steve. All right, Steve. Sorry, oh, sorry.
Oh, thanks, Nort. Yeah, look, this slide just takes us through, I guess, some of the industry partners that we in La Trobe Engineering have worked with or still work with. It's not an exhaustive list. Eddie mentioned before there's actually, up to 100 partners that we have strong connections with. But these are some of our bigger or longer term partners that we have worked with. I might actually ask Nort and Eddie if they can just share a quick story about a couple of them, because I know that over the past few months, Nor and Eddie have actually been out to visit many of these partners on site.
You want to do that, Nor? You want to start?
I'll go very quickly. So we've had, we do site visits. So as a quality assurance measure, we actually go out to every single industry partner that the student is on placement or doing their work integrated learning. And we do that, obviously, number one, to check on the welfare of the student, but number two, to also see what the organization is doing. What type of work have they got you doing? Where have they, where are you going? Why are you doing this? And because myself and Eddie, we're actually qualified engineers, so we can go out to industry and see what you guys are doing and why are you guys doing it. So there's a sort of a logical analysis that is done in that background to make sure that you guys are obviously getting as much as you can from the placement. We don't want you guys just sitting there and digging holes, or we don't want you guys sitting there and putting data into an Excel file. Mind you, that could be something you do in the first week. So something that I always like to say is, when you're taking this work integrated learning placement, don't expect to build the Burj Khalifa. And if you don't know what the Burj Khalifa is, it's basically one of the most biggest buildings in Dubai. So if you go into these placements expecting that you're going to go in there and you're going to design the Burj Khalifa, you've got something else coming from you. So the first couple of weeks can be very, very simple. And the reason you do that is so you can learn about the organization. Because when you do these little small micro, objectives or micro tasks, you learn a lot about the foundation of what that company is. So once again, it's a learning process, but we obviously don't want you guys filling out an Excel sheet for the full 6-month placement. And I'll pass it on to Eddie to give you guys also a little bit more background on our companies.
All right, so what's been very interesting about all of these companies here, and again, this slide is a little bit out of date, but certainly a lot of partners here that have been with us for a long time. The simple fact is this: a vast majority of our students who go on placements in these companies end up staying in these companies. And that's a fantastic result, not only for the companies, for the students, but the university. So it's a win-win-win situation. And as Noor mentioned, we have the pleasure of coming and visiting all the companies and all the students multiple times a year, which means that we maintain very strong relationships with them. Steve's on the phone with them. We're seeing them face to face. So we're retaining that relationship, and that's what gives us an edge as opposed to just someone randomly dropping in. There's a level of trust that goes on between the company and the client in this case is the Trobe University. We're partners essentially. So as long as we keep that trust level high, transparency is high, then our success rate is much, much higher. And that means that we have to make sure that the students that we place in front of the companies are also trustworthy, transparent, and very, very good at delivering what they promised they'll deliver. So there's no point over promising, under delivering. We need to make sure that you guys are able to deliver what's being asked. But a couple of success stories that I can just quickly delve into regarding these particular partners here. We'll touch on Mildura Rural City Council. So we have a lot of students who come from regional Victoria, in particular in our Bendigo campus, but we also have some studying in Melbourne. One particular story which really sort of highlights the success that we're having is the fact that 2 years ago, we placed a particular student, Nicholas Moore, in Mildura. And we came back the following year with another student. And Nora and I sat down and Nicholas walked in. And I thought to myself, well, Nicholas, you've completed your placement. And he said, yes, I have, but I've now got a full-time job here. And we had another student being placed at that time. So there were a couple of good success stories there. One, Nicholas was now mentoring the next student who came in, who's now a graduate. The other success story as part of that is the fact that we didn't know that Nicholas actually came from Mildura. So he moved from Mildura to Bendigo to study civil engineering. He went back to Mildura to do his work integrated learning placement. He got a job. And I'll always remember the thing that he said to me that day. He said, Eddie, when I was a high school student, I always used to wonder what happens to the taxpayer's dollar when it goes towards the councils. Well, now I'm that engineer who actually utilizes that funding to provide better services and infrastructure to people that live in Mildura. And that is a real success story for many, many reasons. But for me, it highlights the importance that we play in building localized economies, not just the big metropolitan companies, but also the small, medium enterprises that are found all over the state. If we look at Metro here, the Metro Alliance, it's one of the largest infrastructural projects in the history of Australia. They said they're going to complete this project by 2025 or thereabouts. Many of you have already seen parts of it when you're driving through the city. You've probably seen huge excavation sites, etc., etc. We've had now in the last few years, probably close to 30 students, if not more, being placed at Metro. And just this year alone, some of our students that are on placement had the pleasure of meeting the Premier of the state, including various ministers. So this is a very good point that you are being exposed not only to mega infrastructural projects from a civil, structural, electronic, and other points of view, but you're also being exposed to the leadership of this state because you're in positions that have very high credibility and very high impact on the Australian economy. So think of these opportunities as not only a way to get your foot in the industry, but as a way to showcase your broad set of skills, to meet new people, and to really grow as a professional in the industry. So there's lots of little success stories that we can talk about. I just wanted to highlight a couple of really quick ones before we go on with the rest of the presentation. Thank you, Noel. And Steve, we can now go on.
Thanks, Eddie. And that last point is a really, really big strength of work integrated learning across the Trobe, and that's building your professional networks. So if you're a student within a campus, it can be harder to build a wide range of professional networks, whereas when you head out into industry, that can really start in earnest, which is what Eddie and Nora have just described so well. So this slide is, it's quite an important one because it captures a lot that you're going to need to know over the next few months. So I'll talk it through fairly slowly just to make sure that it all makes sense. So you can see down the left-hand side, we've got a bit of a timeline. And as a result of COVID-19, there has been some movement of that timeline, and there may still be some movement of that timeline. So please just keep in mind that this is not going to potentially remain exactly as it's listed today, but it's a really useful guide. So obviously we're in April now, and we're covering off the information session today. Also in April is the completion of your expression of interests, which Nora's talked about. There'll also be what we call the big interview, so some online interview submissions that Nora will help to arrange in April. Nora, would you like to briefly talk about the big interview process for students, and then I'll jump back into the timeline?
Yep, sure. So a big interview, how that's done. Once again, that's an engineering hub, but just very quickly, there is a how to submit links for big interview. There's a full PowerPoint presentation, how to create an account, how to create an account, what questions to answer, and then how to submit the links. So that's all on the engineering hub. Once again, the links on this PowerPoint, there will be a link that I will make on an announcement on the engineering hub, so it's easy for you guys to view. But if you guys get into have any issues or any questions, please send me an email.
And just with the big interview, I know it's a very good opportunity to really refine some of your elevator pitches, your personal strengths into a very, I guess, a soundbite form where you can feel confident that you're preparing for interviews with industry. So students have found that to be a really useful tool to help them clarify in their own minds how they can answer some of those commonly occurring interview questions. So it's a really useful tool. And I know that Nora and Eddie use that as part of that selection process, which it's a really important one to get to put some time into it. So from here through April and into May, a big part of the work is that our team and myself and Nora and Eddie, but especially myself and Nora, will be working on recruiting some new opportunities with industry, with our partners for this upcoming Masters group. So that'll be happening throughout April and May. That then leads through to position descriptions. So we receive from industry some really quite detailed project and position descriptions that we can then make available to students and start with the matching. And also in May and June, you can see that we start to talk about selection. So here is where NOR will work really closely on that process of actually looking at the student applications that we're receiving and selecting students. In June and July is when we are looking to have some interviews actually happening. And again, we are hoping that as things become clearer with COVID-19, we can give some more specific dates and some guidance around how much of that can occur potentially face-to-face or more likely in an online setting if COVID-19 is still posing the challenges that it is currently. Once we hit July and August, we're actually looking to really finalise things, legal agreements, so paperwork, enrolment into the subjects, and placements traditionally for the Masters have actually been beginning in July, but we suspect that in 2020, we're looking more sort of July, August, and even into September for placement starts. And we are thinking there'll be more of a staged or potentially a staggered approach to that, where some placements begin, and then next week some more begin, and the week after that some more begin. So it may be a slightly more flexible approach in 2020, but I think this slide is a good one for you all to come back to pretty regularly, just to keep a track of how the year should unfold and what sorts of timelines we are working towards. Before I move on, is there anything there that Eddie or Nor would like to add into this slide?
I just wanted to add a point, guys. What's important to know is that obviously we can't predict how this whole COVID-19 situation is going to unfold. But a slight side of confidence, the fact that we've been able to reduce infections in Victoria and also Australia in general down to a pretty low number, gives us some level of confidence that the second half of the year may not be as bad as we initially thought it would be. Okay, so this is just quietly confident approach to what's going to happen in semester 2. My personal view on semester 2 is that certain companies will go back to work. There's no doubt about that, because the economy will collapse if we don't do that. But the approach to how we go back to work will be different for different sectors. One of the advantages of certain industries, especially if you're a project engineer, which means that you're mostly on site, is that you probably are going to be on site working. Design engineering companies are going to be working mostly from home if this thing continues on. So you need to keep in mind, okay, it's a little bit of a way up situation here. You can decide to go for your dream job, which might be a design firm where you sit in an office designing incredible infrastructure, designing mechanical, electrical systems, etc., etc. Those companies may be the last ones to go back to, business as usual. Whereas other ones that are more on site are going to be probably out there during this entire period. So you just need to keep these things in mind, and we'll also keep it in mind as well as we're looking for partners in terms of what's possible, what's not possible, but we're going to be very, very flexible in semester 2. That means the dates are going to be flexible. That means the hours are going to be flexible. It means you need to be flexible. And of course, the industry partners are going to have to be flexible with us. So we're all in this together, and it is going to be something that hasn't been done before, because we're treading in we're treading in water which hasn't been charted before, right? So we need to make sure that we're aware of the unknowns as we go forward.
Guys, I'm also going to make a very, very, very quick comment. This is just for me. As Steve has pointed out, me, Eddie, and Steve are actually a big part of that matching and selection process for industry. What I would like is, if you guys have LinkedIn, and most of you guys should, especially if you guys have gone through Eddie's subjects, that LinkedIn, through LinkedIn, add me on there, and I'll have a digital a little skim through your experience and what you've done. That's what your LinkedIn is. It's basically an online resume. So any student that basically adds me from Latrobe, I do this. And if there's any advice or any pointers, I will usually send a chat and say, please change this or keep this. So please keep that in mind. It just gives me basically a photo to attach to your name. So I just have that mental image or that mental picture.
That's a good point, Noor, because I know that obviously LinkedIn is a really important thing, and industry potentially will also look at your LinkedIn at some point. If it reaches a point where you're meeting with industry or having an interview, it can be a really a big selling point for you if it's done correctly. So this slide is just to quickly remind you, as we touched on earlier, in addition to the support you have from the people in this call today, La Trobe also has other services there available for all La Trobe students to help them with this sort of stuff. So the Career Ready team really does have a range of tools, and they're able to book in sessions with you. And I know that right now they are taking online bookings, meetings with students to help them in these sorts of things, preparing, getting resumes ready, potentially even looking at LinkedIn and just getting you, I guess, interview ready. So it's a great service to keep in mind. So we've covered today, I guess, some of the administrative sides of things and the angle of the WIL team support that Nora and I and Tim Austin will provide. We've tried not to go into too much detail, but I'm sure there will be some other questions. I know that what we're about to turn to is Eddie Kustovich taking you through a bit more detail from his side of things. So thanks, and over to you, Eddie.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, I'm also going to share my screen, but before I do that, I just want to say one very, very important thing, which we sometimes, I won't say skip, but we don't go into enough detail. So what is WIL and what is it not? So first of all, WIL is not an internship. And I have to say that because although these terms are loosely used to describe a student going to a company and getting some sort of experience, they are vastly different in terms of the legalities and what happens in the back end of things. So I want you guys to also be very careful about the terminology that you use when you talk about work integrated learning. So work integrated learning, work-based learning. Let me explain what it actually is. So first of all, most of you are familiar with internships, right? Internships are arrangements between a student and a company. Normally, universities will keep an eye on the student, but universities not necessarily administering that particular component. Because there's a legal agreement between you as a student and the company directly, the university really has no input into that, except perhaps knowing that you're out there and validating that you're doing work experience. So what is the difference between work integrated learning or work-based learning and an internship? Well, very simply, you are currently a student at the Trobe University. So your working and learning, your learning environment is a classroom. In this instance, because of COVID-19, it's your bedroom, your living room, wherever you are, and online. But let's just imagine that we're still part of the classroom. So the four walls which you sit in. What's changing now? In work-based learning, not as the component work, your learning environment is changing from La Trobe University's classroom to an actual office, a construction site, an underground train station, whatever that might be, right? So your learning environment is changing, but you are still a student, and there are assessments associated with work integrated learning, which means that you are obligated to complete assessments towards the university, and you are obligated towards delivering outcomes for the company. So it is not an easy thing to do, and that's why it's not suited for everyone. And people need to be very clear about what the expectations are from both parties in order to make sure to deliver the maximum, okay? I'll talk a little bit more about what's expected of you as a student from La Trobe University perspective, but I wanted to make sure that you understand work-based learning is not an internship. It is not a job. Yes, you gain industry experience, but you are still a student of the university and you have academic deliverables that you need to ensure are dropped in and assessed. So you will get graded for doing this particular thing, okay? So keep that in mind. So that leads me on to the next part, which is if you have a particular company in mind, for example, you're working for a company at the moment and you want to convert that into a work integrated learning placement. This is fine. This is quite possible. And people have done this in the past. But keep this in mind. Whatever it is that you're doing in the company or planning to do in the company, it has to have some academic merit. That means you can't just go to a company that is an engineering company and be a laborer for 6 months. Some people have attempted to do that. I will not allow that to happen. You are supposed to be doing engineering related work. Now, engineering related work is a very broadly used term to describe what engineers do, but also understanding with what engineers interface with. So for example, engineers don't just do engineering. And I say that with a question mark highlighting over all of that. Engineering work is very, very broad. Engineers can work in different types of roles. I'll just touch on a few. There are consulting engineers, right? There are project engineers. There are construction engineers, right? There are council engineers. There are design engineers. So we can go on and on. These are different types of engineering roles. And you have to analyze yourself as an individual and say, what am I more inclined to do? What am I good at? For example, Mr. Ennis has asked and dropped a comment before saying, I actually prefer site work more. This is important for Noah, myself, and Steve to know when you apply. We need to know who you are. We need to know what you enjoy, what you don't enjoy, and what you're good at. Because if we don't know these things, if we don't know you, then it's very difficult for us to match you with a company where you will have success. And at the end of the day, our main goal is for you to be successful. Because remember, very, very importantly, you are not just representing yourself, you're representing Steve, Noor, and Eddie. You're representing the Department of Engineering. You're representing Trobe University. You are a brand ambassador when you're in the company. So when you don't do well in the company, none of us do well in the company, right? We're one team. And that's very important to take into mind. Every time you make a decision, think, what does this mean for Trobe? What does it mean for me? And what does it mean for the company, right? Keep that in mind as you go on, not only through this application process, but when you actually get into the company. So to set you up to succeed, Noor very rightly pointed out, LinkedIn profiles. Why do we keep emphasizing LinkedIn, LinkedIn, LinkedIn? Whether you like it or not, LinkedIn is the 21st century CV, right? It is the CV that you have to have in order to gain placements. Now, yes, you might say, but I know lots of people who don't have LinkedIn who got a job. Yes, I know a lot of people who played lotto the first time and won lotto. I know a lot of people that bet on sports, have never bet on sports and won money. There are chances. If there's a 1 in a million chance, you could have struck that 1 in a million chance. It could have been a 1 in 1,000 chance. But we try not to leave things to chance in this subject here. We try to make sure that we're ready. And we want you guys to be 100% ready. So when we talk about LinkedIn profiles, it's not just so that Noor, Steve, and myself can see who you are. It's so that the companies, because believe me, the companies will look you up online. They want to see who is Noor Rahim. And they will look at your digital presence. And if your digital presence is either not there or is poorly represented, it's very likely that you're going to be dropped to the bottom of the list in terms of priorities. So we urge you to make effort to ensure that your LinkedIn profile is very well populated, and we can talk about that at a later stage, but at least make an effort to have something which is credible. So the least have your CV, as detailed as it is, equivalent of your LinkedIn and vice versa, at least that. But your LinkedIn profile has no limits. You can have information that you don't necessarily put inside your CV. You just can't fit it. You can't have 50-page CV and submit that. No one's going to read that. So utilize this as a way to sell yourself. The art of selling yourself is part of winning a job in an interview, and winning projects and winning jobs, etc., etc. It all comes together. So that's what I really wanted to emphasize about what WIL is, and I'll talk about the assessments in a second. I'm going to share my screen now. So I'm going to show you guys, and hopefully you can all see this particular page here. Okay, so this is the page that I was talking about before. And I'll go back one step to actually show you guys Engineering Hub. So once you log on to LMS, you have the opportunity to go to the Engineering Hub. Make sure you type it together if you're searching for Engineering Hub. Under Engineering Hub, there's a lot of useful information. And Noor and myself made a lot of effort to make sure that these two windows here, EMS5WLA and EMS4WLA, have all the right information for you guys to be able to answer, let's say, 80 to 90% of the information or the questions that you might have in mind. So let's just go to EMS5WLA so I can show you guys what it looks like and what's there. In fact, I encourage you guys to open this up on your desktop right now as I'm talking to you so that you have a better idea. So a couple of things. First of all, you have all of my information here in all the different ways you can contact me. You notice this number here? This is my private mobile number. Okay, why do I give you my private mobile number? Because I tell you one thing, if you're willing to work hard, if you're willing to put the hard yards in, I am willing to work extremely hard to ensure that you gain placements, you gain jobs, and you get to industry. This comes with a level of trust and understanding. My mobile number is up there because I will trust you guys to message and call me only when it's something urgent and when something really needs to be answered in a short time frame. For all other purposes, use the email and use other forms of communications, use the forums, etc., etc. But this number is available to you in case you need something that you can't answer yourself. If you message me or call me asking me something that's readily available, all I'm going to say is, please look at LMS. So make sure that you read all of this information here before you ask anything or before you make any inquiries, because we put a lot of effort in to make sure this is populated correctly. So let's talk about the prerequisites in a little bit of detail here. I always talk about two things: eligibility and prerequisites, that's one thing, versus rank. So you will be ranked as a student by myself and Noor. That means based on various categories, we will rank you to say, this student is outstanding. I can guarantee that any company will take this student, all the way to the bottom of the list where we will say, this student will be very difficult to place. They do not meet the criteria. They haven't made a good effort in populating their LinkedIn, their CV, etc., a big interview and so on. So based on that rank list, we will deal with you in whatever order we've ranked you. This is why it's important. Even though you meet the eligibility criteria, it does not guarantee you a placement. It may not even guarantee you an interview. It will depend on whether you've put the effort in or not, right? Just ticking a box is not good enough in this subject here. This is not a pass or fail. So take it back to some subjects that you've completed. We've all had good subjects, we've all had bad subjects. We've had good lecturers, bad lecturers, and everything in between. And of course, it's up to us to put the effort in. This is not a subject where you are applying and there's a 50% pass grade, right? It doesn't exist. You are either capable and we believe that you'll be presentable to industry, or you are not. And you will know yourself whether you are or you're not, because we're going to give you examples of what it means to be employable. And it's better that we tell you that than you get to an interview and you get shot down and the company tells us this student was horrible. It's happened before, and we're not going to allow that to happen in the future. So let's go into the actual achievements and so on, what you need to do. We talked about WAM before. I think Lauren asked a question about, okay, what's a good WAM? So your weighted average mark. What we say here is we want you to have a WAM of 70 and greater to be eligible for WIL. Now, let me put an asterisk next to that. Just because you have a WAM of 70 and above does not guarantee you a placement. And just because you have a WAM that's lower than 70, it doesn't mean that you're a poor student. But we have to have some form of indicator of your capacity to perform. So if you have a WAM that's lower than 70, and you're saying, but sir, this is not fair, I'm good, prove it. How are you going to prove to me, Noor and Steve, that you are a capable individual? I'll give you a couple of examples. If you have a WAM that's 67, but you have been working on dozens of projects outside of the university, and you have credible evidence to show, tangible outcomes to show that you are a capable individual, that you are highly employable, we will take you into consideration. But if you do not have that, and you do not have a WAM of 70 and above, it's going to be very difficult for us to actually consider you and place you into a company. There is no sympathy placement here. We need to make sure that you are capable of performing and delivering, and that we're setting you up for success rather than failure. And we've had a couple of bad experiences, and we want to avoid these going into the future. The other thing that you need to be aware of here is that you should have completed 120 credit points if you're a master's level student. If you're an undergraduate student, you should have completed, right, 180 or more, 240 credit points moving forward. You need to have the credit points. That means you should have completed the first year of your master's, or you should have completed the first 3 years of your undergraduate degree to be eligible. Exceptions can be made, And I say that with an asterisk on top of it again. And that is something that we can discuss, but only if your course coordinator approves it. Nor and I do not have, and Steve, we do not have the authority to allow you to enroll unless your course coordinator is approving it. But before you go to your course coordinator, you need to make sure that you have a legitimate case for it. Don't go over there just begging and asking, because you're just going to have a nasty experience. Someone's going to shut the door in your face. We don't want that happening. So please make sure that you are ticking the boxes as you go along. And what I've put here is preference will be given to students who do exceptionally well in ENT and Australian Engineering, Environment and Sustainability. These two subjects are specifically set up to ensure that you guys can at least sit an interview. So as an example, in EMS5WLA, the Australian Engineering, Environment and Sustainability, there's a couple of things that you do that are directly related to a work integrated learning placement. For example, you will do a CV and you will be graded on your CV. You will also do an interview and you will be graded on the interview. Those two assessment pieces will directly influence Noor and myself on your performance and how well you sit in the professional world. So if you're not taking these assessments seriously, you're probably in trouble to start with. Okay, so keep that in mind. The remainder of the content in those two subjects is specifically designed from an enterprise perspective. These are what we sometimes call soft skills. I don't call them soft skills specifically because when you say soft, people think they're not as serious as hard skills or technical skills. But let me just highlight one particular point. Enterprise skills / soft skills are the skills that actually get you to the interview and open the door of a company for you. It is not the technical skills that will do that. It is assumed that you have technical skills because you're completing a master's degree, because you're completing an undergraduate degree. And if the university is doing a good job, then technically you will have the basics under your belt. But these soft skills, enterprise skills, is not something that's measured as much as it is from a technical perspective. So we emphasize this quite heavily, and this is what gets you through the door of a company. So please pay close attention to that. Make sure you put the effort in. Otherwise, you're probably not going to get past Noor and I in terms of our filter, and you're probably not going to get past the company interview going beyond there. We already talked about the subject being broken up into two components, the EMS5WLB and 5WLA. How does that actually work? Well, you will have assessments as part of each one of these, and I'll talk about the assessments in a minute. And you have to ensure that you're passing these assessments. So a very bad scenario is you're doing really well in the company's very happy with what you're doing, but you're not completing your assessments. And you fail your assessments, right? If you fail the assessments in WLA, the 30 credit point, the one that comes first, you will not be allowed to continue with EMS5WLB. So what does that actually mean? Can I still continue working in the company? You can continue working in the company. That may be possible because maybe you arranged it yourself, but you will not get the credit towards your Trobe University degree. And that's not something that you want to do, because the purpose of work-based learning or work integrated learning is that you are gaining industry experience, you are completing credit points, and you're getting paid or you're getting a scholarship to be in the company. These are three incredible value propositions to everyone. And you need to ensure that all three of them are being ticked, not just one of them. And so please make sure that you understand what that actually means for you moving forward. We already talked about that the placement is not guaranteed, so I'll skip that bit there. Number 3, work integrated learning is optional. We already talked about that as well. You can choose not to do a work integrated learning, but given that you're here for the info session, I hope that you have more of an interest to do it rather than not do it. Let me just jump over a few of these because Noor's already explained them. And I'll get to this diagram here, which is somewhat explained already. So what actually happens is you will now submit an expression of interest. You have about 2 weeks. So let me touch on the expression of interest. Please do not rush your expression of interest. You have approximately 2 weeks to submit it. I want to make sure that you put the effort in with your expression of interest. It's like an application. So if you don't put the effort in with your expression of interest, you're probably going to be ranked very low. So you have 2 weeks from now until the end of the month to ensure that your CV is smoking hot, that it's really, really good. That's one. You have 2 weeks to ensure that your LinkedIn profile looks amazing, that your profile picture is representative of who you are, right? Not some photo of you sitting at a bar, because some people do stupid stuff like that. It needs to be representative, professional photo. You need to have a description of who you are as an individual, what sets you apart, etc., etc. So these are 2 things that you can do during the next 2 weeks before you apply with your expression of interest. There will be no excuses, sir, I didn't have time. You have 2 weeks to do that. And it won't take you longer than a single day to do your LinkedIn and your CV properly, maybe a weekend. And there are 2 weekends from now until then, including tomorrow. Make sure that you do that. Once this is submitted, there'll be some interviews that you guys will do. One thing that we'll take into consideration is your CV and your interview from EMS5WLA, if you're doing that subject. If you're not doing that subject and you're still applying, you should be doing the subject, but if you're not, then make sure that your CV and your actual LinkedIn profile up to date, which will compensate for that. Okay. The remainder of the process here, as Steve rightfully pointed out, these dates are rough dates, and because of COVID-19, they might even be rougher than what we initially thought they would be, but they explain what goes on. And here is you. The blue part is you during semester 2 of the placement. You can see exactly what happens step by step. You can see that there is an actual visit into the company. You can see that there are monthly calls to make sure that you're doing fine in the company. And there are other visits, and there's a WIL symposium, and these are assessments. And I'll talk about the assessments later on. I don't want to talk about them right now. Here is the button that you need to click for an expression of interest. Okay, so everyone should now know where it is. No excuses, I don't know. There are some basic information here in terms of what you need to do in order to get there. One thing that we've also put in here for you guys is completion of Career Ready Advantage Gold Award. Yes, it is something that we highly, highly recommend. Now, what does that mean? Why should you actually do this? Because the Career Ready Advantage module is something that La Trobe University emphasizes. And it emphasizes it for various reasons, but the primary reason is that you are staying active outside of the classroom. You do not become an excellent engineer just because you go to La Trobe University or any university for that matter. You become an excellent engineer because you supplement your formal education with non-formal education. And non-formal education more so than formal education, because there are 200,000 international students in Melbourne. 40,000 of them are studying technical sciences. What sets you apart from the pack? Why are you different? And if everyone is completing a Masters of Engineering, and if say 5% of those students had perfect scores, 95 and above, what sets you apart, right? So you need to think about what's going to set you apart. And this is exactly what the aim of this Career Ready Advantage Gold Award is. It forces you to be active outside of the classroom, attending networking events, listening to online webinars that are of your area of interest, meeting professionals in the industry, understanding the requirements to get into industry, understanding what projects the current industry is working on. So really getting your head around it. And keep one more thing in mind when you do this. It's just as important to be likable as it is to be competent. You might want to write that down. Likable and competent. Because if you're super competent, that means you're smart, you know how to do things, you provide value, but you're not likable, you're hard to work with, you're difficult, you're not very talkative, right? You're rude, you're not a team player. It doesn't matter how smart you are, people will not hire you. So likability is something that you all need to work on. And it's something that people skip on all the time because they don't have anyone telling them that they should do that. Steve, can you just mute your microphone over there, please? Thank you. Okay, there are examples here for you and CV templates that you can use. I am not saying that these are the best CVs and these are the best templates. You can use whatever you like. These are just a couple of examples. Before you submit something that looks like garbage, have a look at some of these before you go forward. Now, let me also touch on finding your own WIL placement. Steve also talked about this. From now until the WIL commencement, let's say that you're commencing sometime in July. Essentially, you have approximately 2 months, maybe even almost 3 months before the commencement of a work placement. You have the opportunity to find your own placement. All the students that say, oh, but I didn't get through, you know, there were 60 companies and there were 200 students. Now is your chance to find your own work integrated learning placement company. I highly, highly recommend that you do that. We will run a separate workshop in the coming weeks to find your own placement and how to do that. Last year, Nora and I ran a workshop and we had about 50 attendees. Approximately 15 of those individuals found their own placements. The remainder didn't. Some of them tried, weren't successful. Some of them didn't try at all. It's very important that you give it a go. Why? Because at the same time as trying to get your WIL position, you're also learning how to communicate to companies, how to present yourself. And you can actually see if you're being rejected, you need to ask yourself the question, why is no one engaging with me? Do not use the excuse, they don't want to employ international students. And I will tell you right now, that's bullshit, because we've placed hundreds of international students over the last few years. It's a matter of making sure that you optimize your path into the company. And we can talk about some of those details in that workshop. But my recommendation to you is everyone should right now be doing 2 things. Get a piece of paper out if you're sitting there. And on that piece of paper, and my undergraduate students will notice because I've probably run this with them before, on that piece of paper, draw a line down the middle. On the left-hand side, you will have one title. This will be companies that I know. On the right-hand side, you will have engineers that I know. So let's start with the left-hand side of the paper. List all the engineering companies that you can find and the companies that you actually want to work in. And on the right-hand side, for each one of those companies that you want to work in, list people that you know. And I'm sure you've heard this before. It's who you know, not what you know. Yeah, I'm sure most people have heard this before. It's who you know, not what you know. There is a lot of truth behind that. It's not entirely true because you still have to know something. But normally if you know something, you also know someone. And I'm strongly, strongly recommending to you guys to start creating a network of people in the industry that you know, or at least know of. Because if you don't know who these people are, how can you expect to find the jobs that those people are putting out there? Because these positions are not being advertised all the time. They're staying in the networks. Grow your network, grow your opportunities, and you will have success in this particular approach. But we'll talk about that in that particular workshop and moving forward.
I'm just going to make a very, very quick comment. Guys, right now is probably the best time to also network, as funny as that sounds. It's because everybody is at home. So the majority of engineers, the guys that are probably on, that are not on site working on a specific project, but the guys that are doing design, the guys that can work on their laptops and computers are currently at home sitting on their desks. So if you can network with them on LinkedIn and just send them an invitation and just introduce yourself, I think now is probably the best opportunity because they're sitting there right on that computer. Also having probably a tab for LinkedIn open. So I highly recommend to also capitalize during this pretty crazy time and capitalize on the fact that these guys are working from home.
Thank you very much, Nor. Very, very valid point there, guys. This is the ideal time to connect to these people because they're probably working a little bit less now than they were before. That means they have a little bit more time. People are more active on social media. So before you go doing random stuff on social media is a fantastic tool to sell yourself if you know how to do that. And you got to be out there for people to recognize you. Yeah. And sometimes people say you got to be in it to win it. So the question is, are you in it? And what I mean by that is, are you part of these networks? Are you connecting with the professionals in your industry? Or are you just sitting back and waiting for it to fall in your lap? Because believe me, it's not going to fall into your lap. It is a super competitive environment. It is almost a cutthroat situation. It will become more difficult after coronavirus. There'll be a lot of jobs that are vacated. There'll be a lot of opportunities. But if anyone is going to profiteer and come out of this strong, it is going to be the engineers, right? We put together solutions. That's what we do. And you guys need to be part of that solution, not part of the problem. So stay active and keep moving. All right, let's talk a little bit about the actual assessment. So what is WIL and what does it actually entail? What do you guys do as part of WIL? So Noel mentioned that you will do 800 hours of work in the company. We call that experience in the company. But the deliverables towards the university are actually assessment items. And they focus on one thing strictly. You are expected to do a research investigative project as part of your placement. And the main reason for that is that some students who don't decide to do WIL will actually end up doing a final year engineering project. It's sometimes referred to as a capstone project, right? So this capstone project experience is replicated in the industry environment. Think of it this way. A handful of students will do a capstone experience in the university, doing a research project in a lab of a professor. Most of you are very keen to get out to industry and work in industry. It is not just a matter of you going out there and doing the job. You will have to pick something that you will research as part of this industry experience, as part of being in the company. And you will write a project plan for that. And you will have a work integrated learning symposium where you will present the progress of your work to myself and other academic staff members. And you will, at the end of that entire placement, generate a minor thesis. The minor thesis will report on the investigative work that you did. This can run directly with your job, or it can run in parallel with your job. But either way, you are expected to deliver a thesis, a minor thesis at the completion of your work integrated learning placement, which means that you are doing a lot of work. There's a lot of expectations from you. And you need to put your head down and understand what those are and how you're going to deliver them. So managing your time and managing what you're doing in the job is something that you're going to really have to learn how to do as part of this placement. And the deliverables can sometimes create a lot of pressure on you. So unless you're planning well ahead of time, you can run very quickly into trouble. I'm going to give you a couple of examples now. I'm still sharing my screen here. Hopefully everyone can see my screen still. I'm going to show you what we did over the last 5 days. Over the last 5 days, we ran our work integrated learning symposium. So the symposium is normally a face-to-face event where all of the students who are on placement come together in one venue. Some of you may have even attended these in the last year. And they present what they're doing in the companies. Unfortunately, due to coronavirus, we weren't able to do that this year face-to-face, but we did that online. So the online version, of course, was more private. We had one student, 3 or 4 people assessing the students and going through the work that they did. And I want to show you a couple of screenshots from some of those sessions that we ran. So let me just go to Tuesday here and show you, for example, some of the work. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see that. If someone can just type in the chat to make sure that you can see that. I'm always mindful that it is happening. Nor, can you confirm that people can?
Yep, they can see.
Okay,
yes.
Excellent. So here we have a student. His name is Jeremy Hall. Jeremy Hall is currently working for Hazeldene's. Hazeldene's is the 4th largest poultry producer in Australia. I think they produce something like 9% of Australia's poultry, or sorry, 7% of the chicken. This is quite an incredible feat. Now, some of you might be thinking, oh, well, now chicken processing, is that really engineering? You would be absolutely shocked to see the amount of precision engineering that goes on in a facility like this. It's quite incredible. So this student presented what the company does, what he does in the company, his research project, what he's currently implementing, and he will publish a mini thesis based on his work at the company. So that's an expectation. And you can see on the left-hand side here, myself, Valentina Mitskovsky, Adam Consol, Bandita, these are academics who are assessing the work that you're currently doing as part of your research project. So that's one example. Let me show you a couple of others so you guys can get a good sense of what students can do. Here's another company. This is a student called Julian Herniak. You can see that Julian is working for a company called Integra Systems, which is based in Melbourne's north. And here is currently developing this digital kiosk prototype. So he's an electronic engineer. He's developing various hardware, software, embedded solutions. And he was also presenting his work yesterday. And I'll go through a few more to give you guys a better idea. We go to Wednesday's session. Okay, here's another one of our students, Isabella Mazrani. She's working for John Holland at the MTM Solutions. You can see the diversity of work that she's currently undertaking and the research project. Let me give you one more, maybe Elif. Okay, so you can see Elif is working for a company called Tompkinson Group. They're a consultancy. You can see her roles and what she's doing. She's working on large-scale subdivisions, so that means she's working a lot of water treatment, etc., etc. And I'll give you a couple of more just examples of what students are working on. Okay, no, apologies, don't have that one. No, Nawaz. Okay.
Nawaz is probably the best example as an engineering student. Just a little bit of background. Nawaz is an electronics engineering master's student. Nawaz self-sourced this placement with probably one of the best companies in Australia in regards to accessories for phones and electronics in general, which is Signet. Nawaz did this, and I would highly recommend all of you to look at Nawaz's LinkedIn. He has a tremendous amount of self-learning experience. You know, right now he's doing not just electronic engineering, he's also doing the more computer science SEO strategies. So really looking at that high-level programming languages, unlike and you guys will understand this as electronic students, and maybe some of the manufacturing compared to the low-level programming languages.
So Nawaz is doing an absolute amazing job in the company, and as Norb rightly pointed out, he's someone that you should really look up to. I mean, all the students are doing a fantastic job, but for some of the master students, he's definitely worth looking at. I'll give you one more example, and I'll give you this example specifically because this student here, Shilek Su, she's obviously a Chinese student. She has come such a long way because she was such a shy individual, and now she's one of the best performing students out in the industry, doing an amazing job. She's working for a company called Turf One, and for those of you that like sports, whether it's cricket, soccer, football, whatever sport you follow, Turf One is the largest, let's say, company in Melbourne here, definitely one of the largest in Australia, who is involved in developing and putting out pitches. So various pitches and grasses and synthetic pitches and real pitches, etc., etc. There's incredible amount of engineering work that goes into preparing these facilities. You just wouldn't know that by looking at it or standing on it, but the amount of work that goes into it is incredible. And she has been doing a brilliant job, and it's very likely that she's going to land a graduate position with Turf One as a company. I'll give you one more example just to give you a bit of breadth. Not sure, Noor, if you have a particular suggestion of anyone. Maybe Mohammed. Mohammed's a good one as well. So
yeah, Mohammed at Metro.
Yeah, let's show you Mohammed. Outstanding student, again, someone who has come a long way as an individual. You can see that he's also working for the Metro Alliance, the big project. On the bottom left-hand corner, you can actually see what they're currently working on. So they're putting underground stations which will dissect the current metro city loop and provide additional capacity and minimize the jam that happens internally. So you can see what Mohammed is currently working on. He's working on a particular system there. I don't want to go too much into the details. You can have a quick glance at it. I will make some of these accessible to you guys so you can see them. So there's a variety of work being involved from electrical, mechanical, etc., etc. There was one more student that I wanted to show you guys just to give you a really good idea. Daniel Hook. Where is Daniel Hook? Here he is. For those of you that are more mechanically minded. So Daniel, some of you might actually know Daniel because he's maybe taught you before. Daniel is still an undergraduate student, believe it or not, but he is definitely one of the highest achieving undergraduate students that we've had in the last 5 years. And you can see the work that he's putting out is really industry grade stuff. And he's working for a company called Hand On Industries. This is a very small company, but the company makes very specific custom designed parts for defense industry. So that includes machine work as well as some electronic work, electrical work, etc., etc. Very low volume manufacturing of parts that go into high-end production. So very expensive manufacturing work that they do. And he operates various systems along the way. And so the positions are endless, really, the opportunities are endless. But you can see that each student is required to produce academically worthy content. It's not just going into the company and doing work, because that's actually work experience. This is more than work experience. You are triple dipping in the cookie jar, for those of you that know what that means. You are getting industry experience, you are getting 60 credit points, and you are getting a scholarship. And this was not around when I was a student, and it wasn't even around when Noor was a student. So it's a very recent thing that happened. Actually, Noor, it was just coming in when you were coming through.
That's correct. That's correct. But we would have dreamed to have an opportunity like this. It's once in a lifetime, and you're probably being a student at the Trobe University in Melbourne. There is no other university that does what we do in regards to credit weight, scholarship money, and experience. Swinburne have a variant, Monash have a variant, obviously, of work integrated learning, but nobody does it like we do. So I definitely, highly recommend. And we're one of the highest universities in regards to employability in Australia.
We're definitely the highest in Victoria. So guys, I'm almost near the end there. I want to show you a video which for me really highlights what students are able to achieve. Maybe some of you have already seen this. I apologize if you've watched it already. So I'm going to show you a video of one of our students, Safra Aftab, who worked for a company called Ceramic Oxide Fabricators in Bendigo. You'll learn all about the company. She did an incredible job. She's won numerous awards, and this is her video. So you also produce a video as part of your placement, and this is her video highlighting the company, what she did, what she achieved, etc., etc. So I'm going to play this for you. And
Hi, I'm Safra Aftab, and I'm one of the 6 fortunate Master of Electronic Engineering students who have secured work integrated learning placement at Ceramic Oxide Fabricators, Bendigo. Ceramic Oxide Fabricators is an Australian-owned and operated company with more than 45 years of history in the manufacture of zirconia and alumina-based ceramic products to a large number of high-temperature treatment industries across the globe. The mission is to supply robust and simple and entirely ceramic oxygen sensors. Currently, I'm working as an engineering scholar at Ceramic Oxide Fabricators under the supervision of the general manager and my supervisor, Peter Crowhurst. I have worked on carbon potential analysis using the zirconia oxygen sensors with my colleagues. The work helps the company to understand theoretically regarding the carbon potential in the carburization industry. On the basis of our mathematical findings regarding the carbon potential analysis, we were able to develop an online carbon potential calculator that is now online available at the Australian Oxytrol Systems official website. The aim is to help the customers to choose appropriate oxygen probes regarding their temperature conditions. And I'm glad to tell you that the calculator has already been appreciated from the customers from Sweden and New Zealand. Currently, I'm working to develop a flow valve for reference air. The flow valve will supply air from room temperature to a high temperature oxygen sensor. The special feature is the wide flow range, that is of 50 milliliters per minute to 5 liters per minute. In order to develop a flow valve, there are various factors to be considered. One of the most influential factors was the forces that affects the flow of air and the float movement. After developing the mathematical model for the forces that affects the flow rate and the factors that affects the movement of the ball float, then I have measured the aperture of the needle valve and the weight and the size of the ball float. After all this, I have suggested what should be the requirements for the assembly of the flow valve. After that, I have created a geometrical model in SolidWorks and performed a CFD, that is the computational fluid dynamic analysis, using SolidWorks. SolidWorks is an incredible software that allows the user to design, model, simulate, and test a part according to the real conditions. My work has been appreciated from the supervisor and has been selected as the best poster at the IT and Engineering Showcase at Trobe University. My design flow valve will help the company to fabricate a new product for its customer and will help the company's economy to grow. When you start designing a new product, there are many challenges waiting for you. One of the obstacles for me was to develop a mathematical model, as finding authentic source from the literature review is complex to develop a new design. Another challenge was understanding how the software works. Learning a new software is a time-consuming task, and the software like SolidWorks has so many features to deal with. Another challenge was the testing of the design part according to our conditions, as the flow valve is designed for the room temperature conditions. All the problems were encountered by the help of my supervisor, YouTube tutorials, and the literature research. WIL placement has been an amazing opportunity for me in terms of learning new skills that falls under the criteria of Engineering Australia. While working on the carbon potential analysis, we have applied mathematics and the numerical analysis to develop a mathematical model, and we have validated our work by plotting graphs between temperature and millivolts to validate our findings using MATLAB and Excel. Understanding SolidWorks was far much easier as I've completed my computer-aided designing course during the bachelor's, and I had a good hands-on practice on AutoCAD. Through my completion of the Design for Manufacture course in my Master of Electronics Engineering program, I've studied how production of a part is being done and what are the factors that affect the production of any of the product. While working on the flow valve, I was more concerned about all the environmental factors that could affect the working of the flow valve and the material that should be used in order to produce a high-end product with less production cost, yet a promising quality. Throughout my bachelor's and master's degree, I've worked on multiple projects that includes the production or developing a design on AutoCAD, or developing power supplies, C language codes, or a control systems, or PCB or schematics. The most basic approach to initiate any project is to inquire about the requirements it requires. For example, for developing a program on C language, we need to identify what libraries should be used, and if we are developing a product or a circuit, we should be knowing that what components should be used. I believe that I conduct myself in an ethical and professional manner by being honest to my job and the people I work with. I'm always punctual at work and follow a good communication with everyone I work with. I avoid the circumstances that can result in conflicts and may affect the people at the workplace. I always try to finish my work before the deadline. I'm always ready to learn new things. I have developed a good teamwork skills while working on the carbon potential calculator along with my colleagues. Also, as a solo worker while developing a flow well for the reference field. These skills will help me to work in a diversified workplace where I can efficiently work.
All right, guys, I'm going to pause it there. Just wanted to give you, maybe 5 or 6 minutes worth. You can watch this video. It's on the links up there. To give you an idea of what a student does. We have other videos as well. I don't want to show you more videos, but hopefully that information gives you some insight in terms of what WIL is, what it's not, how you get into it, the eligibility, etc., etc. We can talk about this all day long, but I'm also time weary. And so I'm now going to open it up for questions to make sure that everyone has a chance to ask various things. And we can start with some of them, and Nora and Steve, you can also jump in when needed. We'll start with Isaac McPherson. He said, you said about sustainability subject being more heavily weighted on your decisions of master students ranking and your priorities. Are there any subjects that you view as more important in the undergraduate courses? Isaac, very good question. Yes. The two obvious ones are ideas to innovation and obviously EEP in the second semester, which is engineering enterprise. So engineering enterprise is the equivalent of engineering management subject at the master's level. So these are the two subjects that really separate you from the pack because they're different to the remainder of the subjects that we have on offer at Trobe University. Ashish, I hope I pronounced that correctly, Dahal said, is it possible to look for university-placed WIL at the beginning? If that didn't work, can we still look for self-sourced? Because we might have some time to look till say end of May. Noor, do you want to answer that question?
Yep, 2 seconds. So basically, in regards to self-sourcing, I read that question, but I was a bit confused. So I'm going to just reread it again.
I think what the student is asking here is, okay, it's like double dipping. You have the work integrated learning self-sourced, and you have the work integrated learning university sourced. If you apply through the work integrated learning university sourced approach, can you keep looking for industry placements from self-sourcing?
Yes. I obviously there will be a limit. So that limit, depending on where we're at. So if we go back to my PowerPoint, just give me 2 seconds, guys. I'll just pull it up.
No, I'll just bring that up for you now. Maybe if we jump to another question, I'll jump back into opening up the slideshow for us and we can revisit that one for you with the timelines.
So
yes,
I can also drop a comment on this, irrespective of the slides. So one thing to keep in mind for you guys, so you understand how we're thinking. Why is it important for us to know who is planning to self-source and who is planning to go through us? It's a supply and demand issue, right? So if we have 50 companies, we have to, actually, let me take a step back. We have to know how many students want to do WIL. Because if we know how many want to do WIL and how many are eligible, then we know how many companies we should look for and how many companies we should source. If we don't, that makes it very difficult. We also have to be very careful not to promise a company that we will give you students for an interview and then we can't do that. This has been a big problem for us in the last few years. We've actually had more companies than we've had students. When I say students, it doesn't mean just because you apply that you're in. We're talking about quality students that meet the criteria. So I would love to have 100 students who are eligible and who are quality, because we could place all of you. But the problem is that many of you don't meet the minimum requirements in order to get the placements, and that makes it hard. So if you're planning to self-source, we need to know. If you already have a company in mind, we need to know, because if I have 100 applications and we know that 20 of you are going to self-source, that means in highest demand, we probably have to source 80 companies for the remainder. And that's why it's important for us to be honest with each other to say we're looking for companies. So Steve, please. I
might quickly put some clarity on that from my perspective. it would be a very bad situation, for example, if we matched you to a company and sent you for an interview and you went well on the interview and then you told us, actually, I don't want to go there. I've sourced something myself. We don't want that to happen. However, I think this question might be also saying, let's take an example where we send a student to an interview for a company that you are unsuccessful. So you've not secured a university source placement. The question is asking, I think, would it then be okay for a student to come to us and say, okay, I was unsuccessful, but I have actually managed to find something, a company myself. I think that would be okay if it was within the timelines still to be able to enroll, and if the project you had sourced was approved by Eddie and was appropriate. So I guess the main message is, if you're intending to self-source now, please tell us if that's your preference. If your preference is to university source, that is okay. We would just really not want a situation where you pulled out of a successfully secured university source placement because of a self-sourced thing that's come up. That would really not be respectful of the company, and it would mess up our processes and not be a good outcome for anyone.
Okay, I'm going to add one more thing to what Steve just said. I'll give you an example, because it's always good to talk about examples. Last year we had, I don't know how many applicants, hundreds of applicants. But in the end, when we got to November, I'm talking about the undergraduate, not the postgraduate, we had a couple of students that got through the Eddie and Noor filter. So basically, you made it to the company interview. One thing that Noor and I and Steve can guarantee is an interview with the company, provided that you meet our expectations. We will put you in front of a company and you will have an interview. However, we do not guarantee the placement, because the final finishing bit is you. It's about you showcasing it. But in most cases, and I have been right 99% of the time, if I feel confident this student has what it takes, in most cases, you got the placement, right? Now, that being said, what happens if you get to the interview, you have maybe one interview, maybe even two interviews, and you don't get through? The company says no. The moment we know that, to the moment the last placement can happen, there's probably still 2 months between the two. So we had 3 students who got to the interviews, didn't get through. And then 2 months passed and they said, oh, yeah, we didn't get through and we're very disappointed. So I asked them the question, have you been looking for placements in the meantime? They said, oh, I didn't know we could. So I'm telling you guys right now, there's 2 things you can do. The one is self-sourcing right now, looking for a position right now, which you can say, Eddie or Steve, I have an actual placement arranged with BHP. Fantastic. Thank you very much. We'll do the rest of the work. We'll talk about the details. Then there's the second scenario. You don't go through self-sourcing. You go through university sourcing. We give you the interview with the company and you don't get through. We give you a second interview and you don't get through. As soon as you know that you didn't get through, you can do 2 things. You can throw your hands up in the air and throw the towel in and say, guys, I'm not good enough. I'm not going to make it. And you can do a final year project in the department, or you can continue to try and self-source during that time. And if you're doing a good job, if you're not being rude about it, Noor and I will still continue to help you to try and find one. But that will not be our top priority. Our top priority will be with the students who have actually gone through. So you can continue to try and get a placement along the lines of that. Okay? Let's jump to the next question here. We have Harrison Godfrey. I know Noor's already said yes, but let me dive into that question a bit more. So Harrison says, are we meant to be completing assignments during the usual 40-hour work week while doing WIL? Yes, the short answer is yes, you are. The question is, what do the assignments consist of? So let me talk about assignment number 1. What is it that you're supposed to do? It's actually a project scope. It's a scope report. It's an investigation. So you have approximately 4 to 6 weeks when you start to identify what it is that you're going to work on in the company as part of your research project. And you then write a report on that and you submit it. So you're probably asking yourself the question, when can I do that if I'm working a 40-hour week? You use whatever spare time you have available to push out the assessment pieces. This is why I go back to my original statement. Work integrated learning is not just a simple industry placement. It's not an easy thing to do. You're delivering for the company and you're delivering for the university. But that's the downside of you're also getting 60 credit points, you're getting a scholarship, and you're getting industry experience. So you have two choices. You either do a project at the university for which you get no scholarship, you don't get the industry experience, but you do get the actual credit points. Or the second option is you do the company placement where you get the industry experience, where you get a $10,000 scholarship, and you get the 60 credit points. But you don't just give, you have to take, and that's just the way it works. So hopefully that clarifies it. It is a good way to manage that work. We will talk about that when we actually get to that point, Harrison, but it's not an easy thing to do. So keep that in mind. Let's keep going. We have more questions. I'm reading through the chat. Where are we at? Harsh Sonny. Do I have option to select which position I can apply for? For instance, I'm more interested in site work than office related work, or am I eligible to select position related to that? So Noor, you want to delve into that one?
2 seconds, guys. Sorry, I'm just answering some questions on the chat. So I'll repeat that again. Do I have the option to select which position I can apply for? For instance, I'm more interested in site work and office related work, or am I eligible to select position related to that? Okay, so in regards to where you're allowed to, the short answer is you have no say in which company you can go to, because as the selection panel has a lot more influence on where you go to. But in the expression of interest at the very beginning, you can state, and this is why Eddie has pointed out that exercise he does in both of his undergraduate subjects, where he says to you, get a piece of paper, put a line in the middle, and do some research. That research in particular, what Eddie speaks about is obviously engineers. I'm saying research the industry you're trying to go to. So if it's civil, understand what civil engineering does. Is it office work? What is office work? So what is he doing in the office? If it's site work, what type of site work is he doing? What are the labels for those engineers? You need to research. I see a lot of students sometimes who just say, I want to be a civil engineer. It's like, well, what type of civil engineer do you want to be? And it's like, oh, I have no clue. Well, why did you enroll into this degree? Why have you invested so much money into this degree? Why have you wasted 4 years if you're an undergraduate, 2 years as a master's, if you have no idea? Research. Once you research, put that in expression of interest. Say things. I am interested to get my hands dirty. Or no, I don't want to get my hands dirty. I want to keep my hands clean, and I want to sit in a desk. I want to wear a suit and tie, and I want to be given some tasks, and I want to complete it on a laptop. So be specific in the expression of interest, and we will do our best. As I said, there's no guarantees. We will do our best to align your interest with the companies. But once again, as I've said, there are no guarantees, because sometimes, just sometimes, there's some companies that are, let's say, interested or can give you a mixture of those experiences. We have a company at Colban Water that gives you a mixture of office work and site work. So we can't sit here and say, all right, you're going to be sticking to the office. Engineering, you've got to be malleable, you've got to be flexible, you've got to basically react to whichever situation you're put in. So we always can't give you those guarantees.
And also what's worth remembering is this is a stepping stone, right? As a young engineer with very little experience, you don't have the luxury of picking whatever dream job you want. They are super competitive, right? And so you need to take the first opportunity as a bit of a chance, as a bit of a gamble, as a stepping stone towards a career. You may really enjoy what you're doing, or you might say, this is not really for me, but I am going to get 6 months of experience on my CV. Remember I mentioned the 200,000 students, international students in Melbourne. Remember that I mentioned probably 30, 40,000 of them are studying some form of technical science engineering. How many of them are going to have 6 months of experience, professional experience, before they graduate? Very, very few. Undergraduate and postgraduate, very, very few. So if you are one of those individuals, you always have to look at the upside. Sometimes you get lucky in a position that you're doing something that you really want to do and you're enjoying, and sometimes you don't. But either way, always remember, I am doing something which other people are not. And I have an upper hand. And if you use that wisely, you will land yourself a pretty good graduate position when you graduate. Okay, so it's very important to keep that in mind. As Noor said, we will do our best to ensure that we match you with the right company. But the better we know you, the easier it is for us to match it. And this is why I keep going back to, if your LinkedIn profile says a lot about you, it's going to be much easier for us to match you. If your CV says a lot about you, it's going to be much easier for us to do that. And if your big interview says a lot about you, it's going to make our job easier. So guys, put the effort in. Don't treat it as, oh yeah, it's just a CV. It's more than just a CV, right? It's going to tell you, it's going to tell us who you are as a person. And I noticed there was a question about social media, which Noor has already answered. But your social media is a reflection of who you are. You do need to be social, right? Companies don't want to hire people who can't socialize. Yeah. So social context is very important. You need to understand that when you work in a company, you're going to have to communicate with dozens, sometimes hundreds of other people. So if you can't communicate, there's your immediate fail. Communication skills are probably number one on that list. If you cannot communicate, you're probably not even going to get an interview. So make sure that you put effort in to do that. Okay.
I'm going to be very quick. This is more for our international students and our numbers last year. And these numbers, they're not, I'm going to say them, it's not to scare you guys at all, but we were really disappointed, I guess, in the fact that we put in a lot of work to get these placements, and we put in a lot of work to prepare the students as much as possible. We had 86 students who expressed their interest last year. Obviously, we have prerequisites. 56 of those students met the prerequisites. Every single one of those 56 students got an interview. They all got an interview. Some of them even got two. How many students were placed in the end was only just 25. So the remaining students that didn't get that placement, there was a lot of feedback, I guess, to why they didn't. And it wasn't because we just said to the companies, don't take these students on. It wasn't, we had nothing to do with it. It was totally up to the company. As I said, and as Steve and Eddie have just said, we guarantee you the interview. We can't guarantee you the placement. That is up to you. We will try to get you at a level where there's a 90% chance of you getting in. But for whatever reason, and a simple reason can be, and this is probably the most funniest one, is a student talking about how much they will be paid in the first 5 minutes of the interview. That is one of the biggest mistakes any student can do in an Australian context when applying for jobs. So, I mean, we will go through a Zoom session. We have learned a lot from that experience. We have got a lot of feedback from those industry partners about what some students said and what some students did. And as I said, one example was pay. A second example is just attire, professional attire when going into those interviews. Having chest hair out, as disgusting as that is. Not wearing a shirt, not covering yourself, not being clean and shaven. If you're a male. There were basic mistakes that were done that basically cost them that opportunity. So we will go into detail, but we definitely want to get more than 25 students into placement this year. That we will be pushing for.
And since we're talking about some of the do's and don'ts, this webinar was due to start at 12 o'clock.
Yeah.
Only 19 students turned up before 12 o'clock. So as far as I'm concerned, if I was hiring people, the people that arrived after 12 o'clock, I would not have hired you, irrespective of how good of an engineer you were, irrespective of what excuse you had. So just keep that in mind. Companies look at things like that, because being late one time, it probably says something about your personality. Yeah, it could have been an excuse. Maybe there was a genuine excuse why you turned up late. But companies just won't give you a second chance most of the time. They'll be like, you know what? There's 100 other students applying for this role here. I'd rather not give you a chance because you were late. So don't give them an excuse not to hire you or not to interview you. Be on time. If the interview is at 12, you're going to be there at 11:30, right? And that also counts for when you actually start working. You'll be surprised how many students Nora and I had to discipline because they weren't coming on time to work. This is not a part-time job at McDonald's. This is not something that you're doing with some family member. This is professional experience. If you're late once, they'll let it slip. When you're late the second time, Nora and I will get a phone call. If you're late the third time, you're gone. That's it. You're gone. If the company doesn't pull you, we'll pull you because you're embarrassing yourself and you're embarrassing us. So little things like that is what gets you in. I have to be an incredible engineer to get a job. No, you don't. You just have to do the basics right. If you do the basics right, you will get the job. If you're a great engineer, you'll get promoted. But to get the job, you just have to do the basics right. You have to learn how to communicate properly. You have to learn what it means to work in a professional environment. You have to understand what it means to work in an Australian company, Australian workplace. You have to understand what it means to work as part of a team. You have to understand what the company culture is, right? And you have to be able to do the basics. And if you do that, you're guaranteed a position here. This is Australia. If you don't do those things right, you're not going anywhere. And you're going to blame everyone else but yourself. But it's often the basics that don't get you there. So please keep that in mind.
And this is also, once again, for our postgraduate students. And I know some of the postgraduate students have WhatsApp groups, or, you have friends from various groups on different social media platforms. We had 120 students participate or register for this event. Only 50 have attended. So that tells you a lot in regards to,
150 or 150.
So 150, so a third, literally a third. So this is already giving us an idea of how many students are taking this seriously at the very beginning, how many students are prepared to go to an interview and do well in an interview. Not even an interview, let's take it a step back. How many students will have a good application prepared to basically present to an organization for an interview? So this is obviously giving us an idea. So if you are talking to them, please tell them that this information session, it's not some sort of hurrah, or it's a muck around. Some other subjects, you don't go to the lectures because, your friend will be there and they'll tell them. This is totally different. What we're getting you guys prepared for is real industry experience. So if you guys go out there and you guys make us look a bit foolish or a bit stupid, trust me, this will burn bridges for us and also burns our reputation. Our reputation right now has not been tarnished at all, besides some students, especially postgraduate students, doing some silly mistakes. We are now trying to cut that out completely. So this is actually a good medium to sort of test that theory out. And right now at 50 students, out of the 150 students, we already know which students are taking this seriously or not. So for the students that are here, thank you. For the students that are not, and they will probably be listening on LMS, or they might not have a genuine excuse, as Eddie has said, we will take this into consideration.
Yeah, so Enes has made a very good comment. So I'll just make one example here. So Enes, I don't think we've met before, but I just want to compliment you on being very active and asking questions and comments. If I don't know much about any of you, okay, because, some of you I do know better than others, but if I was just looking at your names like this, if I hadn't met anyone before, Enes would stand out as someone who I would want to have a conversation with, because even on this chat here, he's being active. He's asking questions, he's commenting, he's providing information, and perhaps even answering some of the questions that we're posing to you. That says to me that Enes is a very active individual who cares about his learning and is going to make the effort in the company as well. He's active, he's proactive about that. And he just made the last comment, which he said, that even charity work, being late is taken as very, very seriously. Absolutely. Being late is one of the fundamental things that says something about you as a person, right? It's not just being late for work. You're probably going to be late for everything in life. And that's one thing employers hate. They really hate that. It gives them a reason to fire you, and they will fire you, and they won't give you the chance. So please take that very, very seriously going on. There was one question here from Sai Pavan Palanki asking about credit points. Let me just make sure that everyone understands this clearly. I'm going to deal with the masters first. If you're a master's student, you will be given priority if you have completed 120 credit points, right, before July this year. So first priority, if next semester is your last semester at La Trobe University, right? Next semester. So that means July to December is your last semester at La Trobe University. You are on top of the food chain in terms of priority. If next semester is going to be your penultimate semester, i.e. you have one more semester after that one, you will still be considered. If next semester is your second semester at La Trobe University, you will not be considered for work integrated learning. You will be considered next year, okay? So do not apply for work integrated learning if you're a master student and this semester is your first semester at La Trobe University. This is just for information. Do not apply for it. I hope that answers your question, Sai, and hopefully everyone else has got that clear. For undergraduate students, you will do work integrated learning in the first semester of your last year. So let me explain that in detail. If you're currently in third year, first semester, right? This is your first semester of your third year. Next semester, you will be applying to do WIL to start. The earliest start is 25th of November for 2021. Okay, so do not apply for WIL if you are in second year or first year. The reason we've invited you is to give you a heads up on what's coming. So that way you can start preparing for next year and doing a really, really good job and making sure that you're at the top of the food chain, not on the bottom of the food chain. So hopefully that clarifies it for everyone one more time. Okay. Next question, is any kind, no, I think you answered that question already. Is any kind of prior work experience in the field necessary for WIL? No, it's not necessary, but if you have it, it certainly gives you an even better chance of getting a work integrated learning placement. So keep that in mind as well. Thank you for your information. Could you suggest how I need to prepare further, what I need to develop in skills for applying for WIL? Okay, so that's a whole separate question in terms of how you need to do that. But essentially, you can look online how to build up your enterprise skills. You should be doing EMT and you should be doing AEE, and those subjects are preparing you for that path. I'm going to give everyone one more piece of advice. I showed you a couple of posters of people who are doing their work integrated learning placements right now. It is highly recommended that you connect with other students who have either completed work integrated learning or who are currently doing work integrated learning. Strike a conversation with them. Ask for a little bit of their time. Grab a virtual coffee, yeah, or tea, or whatever you want, and have a chat with them. Get the inside information from other students. How did you go through this? How did you prepare for this? You'll be surprised. People will share information for you. In order to be successful in doing that, be very professional, be very polite. Do not write emails that don't start with "Dear someone," right? People don't know how to write professionally. This is one of the most annoying things. Be professional in your approach, be polite, be mindful of other people's time. Okay, that's very important. And you will have success.
Sorry, Eddie. Also, guys, in regards to a professional way of speaking and writing, spelling mistakes. I know as an international student, English is your second language, but please, there are tools out there right now that can easily stop those mistakes from happening. Stuff like Grammarly or some sort of editing software that you can download for free. I think it's very important to communicate. And I mean, your English doesn't have to be obviously, old English, but it has to be of a caliber where, you know, it looks somewhat professional with no spelling mistakes, some, punctuation being correct. It tells me a lot about your personality. It means you're not just typing things because you're wanting to type it, especially if you're trying to connect with a professional, especially if you're even trying to connect with a WIL student. It's very important for you now to get better at this, because in your job, you will be sending emails. In your placement, your WIL placement, you'll be sending emails to colleagues. You'll be sending emails to suppliers. You'll be asking for this, or you'll be asking for that. And if you have this broken English and you've got your spellings all out of the way or whacked, you will not be given that priority. You'll be probably, we haven't had a situation where an industry partner has really fixated on that, but it doesn't look professional.
We have one more question here, and I'm going to answer this as well. You said, what were some of the common reasons for rejecting from interviews? Okay, so some of the most common reasons for being rejected in an interview, I can go through. So first of all, your application was sloppy. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that whenever you're applying for any job, right, or applying even for WIL, you need to make sure that you very, very clearly articulate who you are, what it is that you're looking for, your skill sets, right? All of that needs to be communicated. If it looks sloppy, if it's not organized well, right? If you're submitting a 10-page resume, if you have spelling errors, right? Spelling errors, please guys, you should not be making spelling errors. You have various spell checkers. Even grammar, download Grammarly to make sure that your grammar is on point. It's one thing that will put employers off immediately. The second main reason to get rejected at an interview is that you have the wrong skill sets. So maybe at first glance, you appear to be the right person, but when I'm interviewing you, I find out, okay, you don't actually fit my company. So once we actually match you with a company, you need to study that company throughout. You need to know everything that you need to know about that company. Find out everything, right? Because the more you know about the company, the better you will be at answering questions. You'll know what they're looking for. You'll know what their company culture is. Every company, especially the big ones, on their webpage will have what their company culture is like, what they actually support, the projects they're working on, the people that work there, right? All of these things is something that you need to know, because I want to know, why do you want to work at my company? And do not answer that question with, oh, because Eddie and Noor put me in the interview, because you're immediately going down. And that's happened before. You're not just there because Eddie and Noor put you there. You're there because you wanted to be there. I didn't put a gun to your head and say, hey, you have to be at this interview. So make sure that you know the company and make sure that you know what they're looking for, right? You'll know who their engineers are, what they work on. So how well do you fit there? A common question that you might get is, okay, Aditya, why do you think we should hire you? And you need to answer that question. And you need to answer it with their perspective in mind as well. And you can say, well, you know, I have the following skills, blah, 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 blah. And how does that fit our company? Okay. Third reason, your personality. Remember how I said to you, likability. Likability is 50% of getting into the company. The other 50% is the skill. So if you're a likable person, it's very good chance that you will get a chance at the job. If you're not likable, no one's going to hire you. And simple things like when you come to an interview, putting your hand out and shaking the hand of people who are interviewing you, that's one thing. Looking people in the eyes, that's a second thing. And I can't emphasize enough, smiling. Guys, smile. When you do an interview, smile. When you do the big interview, smile. If you look sad, if you look like you're about to kill someone because you're angry about something, it's not a good thing in an interview. I don't want to hire you because I'm worried you're going to have some sort of emotional up and down when you're working at my company. Smile, become positive, enjoy the experience, have fun. Yeah, that's very important. Okay, you can also be a bad fit, but what we're going to try and do here is that Noor and I will try to make sure that whoever we match you with, that we're doing our job of matching you correctly. Sloppy appearance, Noor already talked about it before. When you go to a job interview, you want to look sharp. Yeah, my brother who runs a civil structural consultancy, they have this term they use. He looks or she looks Hollywood. Yeah, for some of you that might be Bollywood, but nevertheless, what we're trying to say here is that you look the part. What does an engineer look like? An engineer, in most cases, especially the ones that are just trying to get in, they look professional. Yeah, most of the time, they will wear a shirt. They don't necessarily have to wear a full suit. They wear a shirt. They wear pants. You do not go to an interview in sandals. You do not go to an interview in a t-shirt, right? Look professional. Dress the part. We can talk about that later on. Another important thing is passion, right? If you can't show me that you're passionate about this particular job, I'm not going to hire you, because I'm looking to hire people that I can keep. Companies are not just taking you on because, oh yeah, it's someone that I can have for 6 months. They're looking to keep you long term. And if you do a good job, they will keep you long term. But if you're doing a if you're coming across as no passion, oh yeah, you know, I'm just going to do this job. You have to show me why you want to work here. Yeah, that's the one of the main reasons. Also, when you do have poor follow-up questions during an interview. So I ask you a question and you don't have a follow-up. For example, you're not very responsive. So I've had plenty of people like this. I'll ask a question, oh, tell me a little bit about yourself. This is normally a very tricky question, right? Oh, how much do I say? Do I say this much or this much or that much? You can be sure if all you say is, oh, hi, my name is Safra Aftab. I am a second-year student at Trobe University and I'm studying civil engineering. That does not tell me anything about you. When I say, tell me a little bit about yourself, I want to know who you really are. Where you come from? What do you enjoy doing? What are you studying? What are your dreams? What are your aspirations? Why are you here? Right? Show me more than just the average person. During interviews, you will also have multiple people interviewing you most of it. Sometimes it can be an individual. The people that interview you, they can be from diverse backgrounds. You can have someone from HR, from human resource, and you can have someone from engineering. They are looking for two different things. The engineer is looking for someone who can fit well in the team and be competent and deliver engineering solutions. HR is looking, are you the right fit for the company? Do you have the right culture? Do you communicate well? Are you coachable? Yeah. What does coachable mean? If I give you an instruction on how to do something, I want to see that you can follow instructions. Nobody likes someone who's a smartass, especially if you're not good, if you're just average. If you're brilliant, it's still not something that you want to do. But if you're just an average undergraduate student, which most of us were or are, you need to be smart about how you respond to instructions. People want to know whether you're coachable. Can I coach you to become a better person? And I can talk about Noor, for example, because Noor and I have worked together. Noor was my undergraduate student and I was his supervisor for his project. Noor was very coachable as an individual. He takes advice very well. He takes notes. He takes instructions. He follows up. He asks questions, right? That's the positive sort of person you want to have. And Noor's now employed at Trobe University. So I guess you can sort of know what the end outcome of all of that was. But that's the examples that we're working towards. There's lots of other stuff that you need to know about interviews, but I don't want to go into them. Hopefully that gives you some of the basics that you need to be aware of. Guys, just jump online and look it up. You'll find plenty of resources to be able to do that. Okay? Noor, I know you've been answering a bunch of questions here, but are there any more questions remaining?
There is one for one student. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to answer this because I think it's actually a good question. So this is from Isaac. My job has offered for me to stay on during the WIL period at council, although they understand if I would like to do it elsewhere to broaden my skills. Would you recommend going elsewhere or staying at my current job, as my current job will get me into a management role earlier after uni offer, but I won't have a range of experience from a different WIL experience. So I'm going to say a quick couple of things there, and I'll let Eddie finish off there. Isaac, it is totally up to you. I mean, you're in a situation right now where you can sort of now dictate where you want to end up, especially if you're doing or you're having some experience from the council. So you already know what council work consists of. So just quickly, especially in civil engineering, you know, you've got council work, which is basically local government. You've got SMEs and regional and metropolitan Victoria, that will do some consulting work for the government. So design firms, you'll have some big private large corporations. Robert Burke Group is definitely one example. So what you need to now do is you need to research, where do you want to go? Where do you see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years? Do you see yourself working in local government, being a senior designer, senior engineer? Most of the work in local government you end up outsourcing to smaller SMEs that are probably in that that location or that vicinity. Or do you want to expand and broaden your skills with another organization? So that is going to be totally up to you. We're not going to say go down this path or go down this path. You have the experience. Obviously, we have the exposure. We understand which company does what. So local, state and federal government, SMEs, private corporations. So we can sort of give you a taste of what they do in each organization. But as I've said, I've replied back to you. If you want to discuss this further, just email me and we can have a one-on-one to discuss this. But I'll let Eddie maybe make a quick couple of points there.
Yeah, I think, Isaac, you're in a position, a good and bad position. It's good because you've already secured something. It's bad because you're probably now wondering, hey, what else is out there? This is pretty typical of young, ambitious engineers, right? You want to see the world before you decide on what you want to do. While you're young, my recommendation to all of you is explore. Explore as much as possible. This is the time to explore, try new things, fail. You're probably wondering, oh, wow, fail? Really? You want us to fail? I don't mean that as in fail the subject or fail something specifically, but now's the time to trial things, succeed and fail. Because when you fail, you certainly know, oh, yeah, I did something wrong. Maybe that's not what I want to do in life, as opposed to I've had success after success after success. When failure comes later in life, it hits you a lot harder. Yeah, I could compare it to, for example, if you're a boxer. If you're boxing at the age of 20 or 25 or maybe even 30 and you get hit and you get knocked out, it does damage, but you recover very quickly because your body's young. You recover very quickly. If you get knocked out at the age of 50, your body's not recovering as well as it is at age 20. That's a physical point of view, but psychologically as well, right? Psychologically, when you're young, you have more resistance to failure than when you do later, because later on in life, you'll have a lot more dependencies. So in essence, my advice to you is try new things if that's something that you want to personally grow in. If you're happy with what you're currently doing, don't change. Yeah, don't change. Stay where you are. If you're really enjoying it, you're getting a lot out of it, stay where you are. But if you're feeling uneasy, like, oh, yeah, there could be something else, I'm not really enjoying this, then try something else, right? It's always a level of comfort. So Isaac, we can talk more about this at some point, but my advice is if you're really enjoying what you're doing right now, don't change. Just stay there. Enjoy it, right? You can always switch later on if you want, but this is a good opportunity. Okay, I think we've dealt with most of the questions. I don't think we have any more.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, we're going to give you 2 more minutes if you have any more questions. You can also raise your hand, right, on the chat. You can raise your hand and you can turn on your microphone if you want to actually ask the question using your microphone. This is possible.
I think it's a good opportunity, especially with 3 of us here. So yeah, if you do have that, if you do want to speak, please do. Don't be scared. Yeah.
Nor,
yes, sir.
I might just jump in with a quick thing that I thought was worth talking about, just while we have this final 2 minutes. There's been a lot of talk today about scholarships. And it is quite a rare strength of this engineering program. So my role in the Science Health Engineering College currently is working with the team that we process around about 1,500 placements per year in non-clinical work integrated learning. So all sorts of areas, science and health and data science and engineering. Very, very few of those 1,500 placements have any scholarship or any exchange of money going to a student. In fact, it's probably, I would say, less than 10% have what you guys have the opportunity for with a scholarship. So it's important to note, as Eddie has very clearly said today, that work integrated learning is different. The government, the law says that you are allowed to go into an organisation and not be paid because you're doing some work in relation to your learning, and it's for credit, and you're being assessed by La Trobe. So it's actually quite a bonus that this program does have a scholarship, and how it works is that industry is giving some money to La Trobe and we are then providing that to the students. It's not the same as having a job. So one exception, of course, is someone like Isaac, who might do his will at a place where he already works because he's employed there. But most students are going to a company, they're not getting a job yet. They might get a job later after the placement, but it's not an employment scenario in most cases, and they don't actually have to pay you. But the scholarship is a way of recognising a few things. It's recognising the success that has been involved in securing the opportunity and getting to the subject. And it's also a way of helping to support some of the costs of living while you're doing that experience. But it's really important to know that, like Nor said, don't make it the first question you ask in an interview. The scholarships are all going to be the same value, and you shouldn't really be raising that, and it shouldn't be the first point of discussion. And it's a privilege really to get that scholarship.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, we have someone who wants to ask a question. Dyson, I'm going to allow you to talk now, so please have your microphone on. And Dyson, you want to ask the question?
Yes, Eddie. Good day to everyone. I'm actually, the question that I'm currently having is, you guys can hear me, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. The question that I'm having is that I have worked in different fields, which is not related to engineering, rather civil engineering, such as graphic designing and stuff like that. And when it comes to university projects and the extracurricular activities as well, I've been working on especially in Eddie's subject as well as quite like a designer and stuff like the product designers and stuff. So when it comes to, let's say, when I'm putting some sort of experience to my CV, which is not related to the field that I'm going to refer, would that be a problem or would that be okay?
Okay, good question. I'm sure many people will have this question. So let me just summarize. The question is, I have various experiences, but I don't necessarily have experience in the field that I'm applying for. Guys, so undergraduate students and postgraduate students, two different cohorts. If you're an undergraduate student, it's very, very unlikely that you will not have experience in the field that you're about to go into. There's nothing wrong with that, okay? If you're a postgraduate student, you could be in the same situation. Most of the time, the company, of course, companies always like when student has previous work experience, but this is not a requirement. You can have work experience that's outside of the field. So many students, common mistake. For example, you might come to me and say, Eddie, I have 3 years of experience in McDonald's. Should I list that? Of course you should. Because working in McDonald's, whether you're serving customers or working in the back, what do you think you're learning while you're working in McDonald's? First of all, you're learning how to deal with customers. Not every customer is polite. Some people are very rude. So you're dealing with rude people. That means you know how to communicate to people. Hopefully you've learned how to communicate more than someone who's been stuck in a lab for the last 6 years, okay? Second thing is, if you're working in the kitchen, you're operating, that means you're learning how to follow instructions. You'll be surprised how many people don't know how to follow simple instructions. I'll say, please do this and use red, and someone will use the color blue. Oh, I didn't realize, I forgot. So following instructions can seem like the most simple things, but people fail to do it. So any experience that you have in the past is very relevant to whatever job that you're applying. If you're an undergraduate student or postgraduate student with very little experience, you need to populate your CV with whatever you have. In 5 years' time, when you have experience in industry, you won't be including your McDonald's experience because it's no longer relevant. You will have 5 years experience somewhere else. But up until that point, you put whatever you have to offer. So what I'm suggesting, I think there's a lot of students here that will need additional support. So what I'm going to suggest is I will run a workshop sometime next week, perhaps next Saturday, on writing CVs, LinkedIn profiles, and basics for interviewing. The interviewing part we can leave for later, but definitely CVs, resumes, and LinkedIn profiles. I think it's very important that you guys have a workshop with myself, maybe Nora if you want to be involved, that we can make sure that you guys actually have the right stuff on your CV. I've been doing this for a long time, so I know what I'm doing, but it's also important that you come prepared. So don't come to sessions where you haven't started. Write a CV, and you can share that CV, right? I can give you screen sharing capacity, and you can share your CV, and everyone will have the chance to see your CV, and we will compliment or we will critique your particular CV and say, this is not good, and here's why. This is good, and here's why. We're going to work as a team to get over the line, but you guys need to make the effort, okay? Eddie's not going to write your CV for you. Nor's not going to write your CV for you, and you only have yourself to blame to do that. And it's probably next Saturday. We haven't decided yet. At the moment, I've been working 19-hour days, so that's why I haven't turned my camera on. I look like a disaster because I need to get a few days to actually get back to my normal routine. But very likely we'll do this on Saturday. We'll run this workshop. And the reason we're doing this, right? This is not part of my workload. It's not part of Noah's and Steve's. We don't run stuff on Saturdays. But we genuinely want you guys to succeed. But the people that will succeed will be the people that put the effort in. If you make the effort, we'll make the effort. Don't come asking for help if you haven't tried the first thing yourself, okay? You will get an LMS notification after this. When I load this webinar on YouTube, you'll be able to watch it. And I will also give you a notification probably Tuesday or Wednesday about when we'll run the workshop on CVs and LinkedIn profiles and so on, okay? We have one more question. Should experience be removed and added from CV based on the jobs being applied for? Okay, this is a very good question, Suman. Yes, it should. Okay, guys, if you have a lot of different experiences, then you should be selective about what you put on your CV to that particular job. And I'll give you an example. Maybe you've worked in 3 companies. One of the companies is a McDonald's. One of the companies is, let's say, Trobe University demonstrator, and the third experience might be a civil engineering company. If you're an undergraduate student, postgraduate student, you're probably going to include 2 or 3 different experiences. If you have more than 3, something has to drop off. So select what you feel demonstrates a broad set of skills for that particular job. You need to know what the job is that you're applying for. So first of all, you need to know what the company is so that people know what you're applying for. Sometimes you won't know. So in this instance, you're applying for work integrated learning. You don't know who you're applying for. So you need to be thorough. You need to be broad. In the first instance, keep your CV to a maximum of 3 pages. Nominally 2, but if you really need to show us that you're amazing, then do 3 pages. But no more than 3 pages, because no one's going to read that. I am going to flick through your LinkedIn profile though. That I can do very quickly. So you want to make sure that you've got plenty of projects and experiences on there as well. British, I have done WAMP in my last semester. Do we get any special consideration for such a program? Yes, but the special consideration will only be special if you are demonstrating the right capacity. So just because you participated in something doesn't mean that you actually learned something. So show me what you've learned in the program through your CV, through your interviews, through your LinkedIn. If you can show those 3 things, then of course you're going to be given. You're naturally given special consideration. So just being part of something doesn't guarantee you anything in life, yeah? All right, guys, I think that's all we have time for. I'm also out of breath because we've been talking for 2.5 hours. Thank you everyone for staying online.
I'm going to be very quick. I'm just going to share my screen if that's okay. 2 seconds. 2 seconds. I just want to let everybody know. So basically where we're at. Okay, just share. So you guys can see this, obviously. Everything is now, that's better. So everything is now online. So you guys can answer the questions for your expression of interest. Submission has been opened. Time remaining 14 days and 9 hours. This is for your CV. Unofficial academic transcript. Guys, unofficial academic transcript. It says it right there. I don't want to get any emails on how to do it. Very simple. Please go onto your student online. Go to your results and just literally click on unofficial academic transcript and then upload it as a PDF. I don't want it in a PNG or anything like that. PDF format, guys. Everything as much as you can, PDF format. It helps us a lot. And of course, your CV and resume, which goes here. So 3 things all open for you guys now to view. And if we go to here, you've also got from careers a PowerPoint in regards to what to do, what not to do, CV, resume, how to do it. It's basically from careers and it's right there. We'll obviously update our presentation if need be, but basically if you guys have viewed all of this plus the video, you guys should be in a very good, I guess, situation to really create a good application. All right. So that's it from me. Eddie, any comments? Stephen, any comments?
No, I'm good. I'm out of breath.
All right, no worries.
I can't talk anymore anyways. Guys, thanks very much for joining us online. Hopefully you found this useful. and we will see you online again sometime next week. I'll post this on YouTube very shortly. I just need to process the video, and I'll send that out to everyone else. So for those of you that came today, I know who came, I know who interacted, I'll remember your name. Thank you very much. Enjoy the weekend. Happy Easter.
Ciao, guys.